Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Adam Talks with me, Adam Carruthers, in conjunction with The Athletic. Now, the news, of course, is transfer deadline day. It's all across the internet. It's the only bit of news that could have broken even how popular the Rihanna getting pregnant story was. That's how seismic everything was. It truly is the case here. And there's a recap and the fallout and how every player is going to do at their respective new clubs, et cetera, all of that analyzed in depth on the Athletic app. So if you head on over to theathletic.com/Astro6, that specific website address will allow you to get a free 6-month subscription to the Athletic by being an Astro subscriber. It is as easy as that. And there is a lot to get through, trust me, for all of the teams involved. So let's bring in Adam Leventhal, who's the transfer guru in the situation, but he's also the Watford correspondent. So you're wearing a slightly different hat here. And Amitai Winehouse, who's the news editor, one of the news editors over at The Athletic. And gentlemen, I want to start in Merseyside, Everton, Goodison Park, because, I mean, technically it's a bit different here, but Frank Lampard, he's now back in management almost exactly a year after he got sacked from Chelsea. Adam, first, what do you make of this appointment? Is it a smart one?
Well, I think it's an exciting one, certainly for the Everton fans, because, and I don't think anyone at Goodison Park would dispute this, but the atmosphere has gone pretty toxic over the last couple of months under Rafa Benitez, and they clearly needed to make a change. The big question was who was going to be the right person. Obviously, Duncan Ferguson was put in interim charge. A lot of people were thinking they needed someone that knew about the heartbeat of Everton and maybe he would be the man, but he effectively ruled himself out and said that he didn't have the experience. Then there was strong links with Vitor Pereira. Maybe we'll talk about him a little bit more in a moment's time. And then Frank Lampard, and he sort of came up on the rails, really. And he obviously clearly wanted to get back into management. There was links in the summer with Crystal Palace. Effectively, he turned them down in a way, and that has opened up plenty of opportunities for him since. And now he's landed back in football at a big club, but a big club that is struggling. And it's going to be fascinating to see how he adapts to life in the Premier League at the other end of the table, because we know that, he had some highs working with younger players at Chelsea, for example, but obviously it didn't end particularly well. And then Thomas Tuchel picked up the baton and ran with it and did very, very well indeed. So it's an exciting one for the Everton fans. It's a fresh start, and hopefully for them, it will add some impetus to the season, because it's much needed. They're only 5 points above the drop zone and they are in trouble.
Yeah, I'm also looking at the players that he did manage at Chelsea, and they are high-profile players. I mean, that squad will go on to win the Champions League. Amitai, what do you think about my theory here that going to Everton has allowed him to be top dog? Kind of like Gerrard at Aston Villa in terms of being this high-profile name, because at Chelsea, okay, we all know who the players are there. They are probably bigger than Frank Lampard is at the club, but here it's a different scenario, and it could help him.
It's very interesting because when he was at Derby, for example, I feel like he had a fairly decent first season. And then obviously he went to Chelsea. And as you sort of hinted at there, his success came when he was managing maybe the lower profile players, the players that came through the academies, the ones who had a lot of respect for him. And then he had that summer where they brought in, big names, Timo Werner, Kai Havertz. That was the season where it all became a bit of a struggle. And maybe that's a bit strong, but I feel like this is a really good opportunity to understand who Frank Lampard is as a manager, actually. At Chelsea, the club sort of manages itself. It's not the manager who necessarily manages Chelsea Football Club. At Everton, as you say, he'll be top dog. If you're a young player, like it was at Chelsea, if you're a young player and Frank Lampard comes in as manager, all of a sudden you have a lot of respect for the man above you. He then has a few high-profile names to deal with. He's got Donny van der Beek, who's just arrived, Dele Alli, who's just arrived. Obviously, you've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who's an England international. They've signed a lot of players. These are a lot of people who, do have experience, do have talent, do have ability. But they will all know the name Frank Lampard, and maybe, just maybe, will give it a bit more credence than, like I say, a Kai Havertz or Timo Werner or any of the other big names that Chelsea would have done.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at the players that came in. How much of a say do you think Frank Lampard had on Dele Alli and Donny van de Beek for you, Adam? I'm also looking at the fact that he seems to be a fan, I guess we all are fans, of that Ajax side that almost reached the Champions League final because he bought Hakim Ziyech, didn't he, to Chelsea. I'm sure he had a heavy say in his acquisition at the time. And van de Beek, part of the same side.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one with Donny van de Beek because we're not entirely sure whether the wheels were already in motion before Frank Lampard was actually appointed, because it sort of hit a period of time over the weekend where there were interviews going on the Friday, but Donny van de Beek to Everton was already being talked about. Crystal Palace were already in the mix for him as well. So whether he was directly influential on Donny van de Beek actually coming, we're not quite sure as yet. But obviously, if it did, push came to shove, Donny van de Beek goes, well, yeah, I would quite like to go and work under Frank Lampard. So it might have had an influence. In terms of Dele Alli, then I think that one is maybe a little bit different because, it's very much the situation that Dele Alli will have known that Frank Lampard was in charge. They might have even been able to have conversations in terms of, right, come on, come to me, let's get together, let's try and get you playing again. And we were discussing it on one of our transfer shows yesterday, which incidentally, they are still available online. You can see them on Twitter and things like that. That he, as a manager, as a former player in a similar style to Dele Alli, may well just be able to get him back up to his standing quite a few years ago and get him working on his game in a positive way. And maybe this move for Dele Alli away from Tottenham, where he's spent a number of years. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of appearances he's made, 269, he's scored 67 goals, but he has really just hit a bit of a mental block over the last couple of seasons. This might be an opportunity for him to get back to his old self. And Frank Lampard, as someone who has been there, done it, worn the T-shirt, scored a hatful of goals in the Premier League as a midfielder, arriving at the right time, it might be the perfect partnership. We shall see.
Yeah. By the way, Jack Pitt-Brooke on The Athletic has published an article, I think it was just earlier today, as a matter of fact, about whether Dele Alli can rediscover his best form. Just a quick one, Amitai. Won't Van de Beek and Ali be competing for the same spot? Will Donny van de Beek be benched again like he was at Manchester United?
Well, that was my immediate thought when I realised that both of them were going to go to Everton, is that they do play in a very similar position. I suppose the one thing you could say is that Dele Alli was at his absolute best at Spurs when he played almost as a second striker behind Harry Kane. So if you can somehow make it work that Van de Beek plays more as a central midfielder and Dele Alli plays more in an advanced role, maybe supporting Dominic Calvert-Lewin, then maybe that would work. But yeah, I mean, for me anyway, they fit into the same position in the team. So that, I guess, is what Frank Lampard's there to do. Everton have sort of immediately provided him with a little bit of a headache when it comes to selecting his first side. He's got to go work that out now.
Yeah, let's hope he can overcome it better than whether he could play with Gerrard in the middle of the park for England. Anyway, we've spoken about Frank Lampard being a new managerial appointment. Don't forget, another one occurred earlier this month as well. Roy Hodgson returning to management. Adam has written some articles about Roy Hodgson returning to the game. It's also available right now on the Athletic app. Coming up, though, we're going to discuss what happened in North London. Welcome back once again to Adam Talks with me, Adam Carruthers, in conjunction with The Athletic. Now, there are some really outstanding articles you can enjoy right now, including James McNicholas and Amy Lawrence, on why it's a huge gamble for Arsenal not having a replacement for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who, of course, as we know, has now left the club. And Liam Toomey and Mark Carey discussing if Chelsea can rescue the Havertz and Werner situation, something that could play out very interestingly over the course of the rest of the season. Now, let's talk about what happened in North London. A very, very busy day for both North London clubs, but only Tottenham were actually able to bring players in. So, Amitai, coming to you first about this. Were Arsenal actually close to signing anybody? Because I think it was 72 hours before the window closed, Alexander Isak was spotted around Arsenal, his car, the license plate. Was anything going to come to fruition, anything even remotely close?
So the word yesterday was always that Arsenal's position towards the end of the window was they essentially tried to expedite deals that they're hoping to do for the summer. So that was, for example, Isak. But again, there's no guarantees they'll go back for him in the summer. There was just, the plan was to bring a striker in the summer. And if they could do a deal for a striker between, say the last week of the window, they would have done it. The truth is that I think by the time it got to deadline day, they were always very unlikely to bring a first team player in. But I think they held out a little bit of hope. But yeah, nothing coming in at Arsenal. And as Amy Lawrence and James McNicholas have written this morning, that puts them in a position where it's a bit of a gamble, actually, because obviously they've let Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang move to Barcelona. And I think that's a very interesting situation. They now have two strikers in Alexandre Lacazette and Eddie Nketiah, one of whom's contract is running out at the end of the season, and who I think is, sort of destined to leave the Emirates. The other one is not necessarily up to the standard that Arsenal want at this stage. In fact, I think both their contracts are running out at the end of the season. So they're in a very, very interesting position, given that they're actually potentially in the mix for Europe and maybe even the Champions League. And Mikel Arteta has to make the best of what is actually quite a thin pool of resources at this stage.
Yeah. Adam, I'm not sure if you've read the article because you only got home about 9 hours ago and you probably just woke up to come and record the show with us. So thank you for that, by the way. But I mean, it's not just up front. They've let quite a few players go this transfer window without anybody coming in. Where do you think this leaves the squad right now? How strong are they?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it, isn't there? That there's always been the narrative of Arsenal that under Mikel Arteta, there needed to be a large-scale reconstruction of the squad, and obviously he's had, relative success with a younger group of players and integrating a new group of players together and doing well. They're only a point off the Champions League places, 2 points off the Champions League places currently, as Amatai mentioned. So the view is that they needed to do this work. They've actually done this work in this window. They haven't rushed into trying to sort of money grab and just try and grab talent for short-term gains. They've taken a longer term view and thinking, right, well, if we clear out now, that's fine. Let's have faith in the players that we have had some success with already this season and try and kick on. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, effectively hasn't been part of the group for quite some time. So he's not a huge loss. They've coped without him recently. And then obviously there will be the other school of thought from the Arsenal fans that will be saying, well, hang on a minute. You need to replace a big gun like that, especially one that is taking a lot of money out of the budget as well. I know there's been some sharing in terms of his wages and things like that for the initial 4 months with Barcelona, and then they're going to renegotiate in the summer. But you need to invest at a time when you are strong. So it's basically, it's similar with the Frank Lampard situation. We haven't got a crystal ball, but it is going to be fascinating to see how it does pan out. Is Mikel Arteta and the powers that be at Arsenal's view that, okay, let's just keep calm and carry on? Is that view the best? Or are the angry Arsenal fans that are saying, how have you not bought a striker? Are they going to be proved to be right? So as it always is in the Premier League, the narrative is going to be fantastic and fascinating to watch.
Yeah, and it was such an interesting time as well because they haven't scored a goal in 4 games. I know we're currently on a break. They've had, 3 red cards, and they were eliminated from 2 competitions, all in the month of January. Yet no acquisitions were made. So should injuries occur, et cetera, et cetera. What about Spurs? They actually did manage to bring in some players. I mean, it was extremely busy, even by Daniel Levy's standards, Amatai.
Yeah, very, very busy deadline day. Bringing Kulusevski and Bentancur is sort of business that I guess most clubs would want to do. I think it's quite interesting with Spurs that they went into the window wanting to sign a right wing back in particular, or a player who could play there, and have brought in a winger and a central midfielder instead. But I do think they very much improve Antonio Conte's options at Tottenham. Paratici obviously going back to his old club as well to do business. Again, interesting. Kulusevski is someone that Conte wanted when he was at Inter Milan, and the winger wanted to go to Juventus instead. Bentancur, another really good player. I do just think it improves Tottenham in particular. The other interesting element is the amount of sort of players they managed to shift out the door. Tanguy Ndombele was incredibly highly rated when he came into Tottenham. Like, I don't think we need to change that narrative in retrospect, but he just hasn't clicked at Spurs at all. So getting him out the door, getting his sort of wages off the book and potentially getting a transfer fee in the future from Lyon's good business from them. Bryan Hill, I think, has had quite a disappointing 6 months for a player who's cost a lot of money, and getting him to Valencia and Lo Celso to Villarreal, it's the sort of business, again, as you said with Arteta, there was this element of sort of shifting the squad and reconstructing it. Tottenham have sort of been through this continual reconstruction phase since Pochettino left. And in fact, before he left even, if this allows them to shape the squad up for what Antonio Conte wants, then it's a very sort of successful deadline day. I think it'll just be interesting to see how that pair settle and whether they give him what he wants at Tottenham.
Yeah. All right. And what do you think Antonio Conte is feeling right now, Adam? Because he's cut a very disheartened figure in recent weeks when the Premier League was still happening, of course. Do you think he's going to be a little bit more buoyed by what's happened in the transfer window?
Well, it was looking at one point they wasn't going to get anything. So, at least he has got in some players, and he has also, maybe got a smaller squad to work with, which can often be an advantage. You have, more of a siege mentality almost. And, that can also, when you have a very sort of hard taskmaster in a head coach, can actually breed some togetherness as well. So I think that he will be pleased that he has got a couple of players in. Obviously, there is that familiarity, as Amatai mentioned, with Fabio Paratici, that, there is that criticism that it's like, well, who are we going to get? Let's, scout the world. That's all right. I know these couple of guys that we had at Juventus, that they're good players and I can rely on them. So there is that sense that they're not taking a risk on some of the, recent experiences that they've seen come and ultimately fail, the likes of Ndombele and Hill and Lo Celso. So they can rely on these signings. They know that they're going to have, an extra attacking element in Kulusevski. They know they're going to have a hardworking midfielder in Bentancur. So, they've got something new. The right wing back, which they didn't get, is unfortunate for them. But then it always seems to come back with Tottenham. Forget Antonio Conte, forget Jose Mourinho, forget whoever's gone before. There's been so many managers recently. Maurizio Pochettino. Who's your plan B after Harry Kane? They still haven't really got one. So if he goes down, they're almost back to square one. So we will have to watch and wait and see.
It's going to be fascinating to see who finishes higher than who in the league table. And of course, there's still a North London derby to be played between the two sides, a rescheduled one, I should add. We're going to go for a final commercial break, though. When we return, well, what happened over in the Northeast, Newcastle, St. James's Park, we'll have a quick discussion on that. Hello and welcome back once again to Adam Talks with me, Adam Carruthers, in conjunction with The Athletic. We've talked what happened in Everton. We've talked North London, both clubs. What about Newcastle? All the speculation, Adam, about how much money they would spend. They would link to pretty much every player on the planet. But the business has now been conducted. It's around £90 million was spent. Was this the ballpark you thought they would actually be splashing the cash? Yes or no?
Well, I'm not surprised that they've spent £90 million. I think at the beginning of the transfer window, and I got some criticism from Newcastle fans when I suggested that maybe their expectations are a little bit too high, and there is a bit of a mismatch between expectation and reality at the beginning of the window. But it wouldn't have been beyond the realms of possibility that they could have actually spent £90 million on one significant big player. But the problem was that they always were in the situation that they were in. They were in a relegation battle. So no real, genuine big gun was ever really going to join. And I think over the course of that transfer window, we saw that there were a few, Sven Botman, Diego Carlos, looked at the proposition and thought, yeah, I'm all right for now. Thank you very much. So they've ended up with the players that maybe they've looked at characters more, and they've certainly got good characters in the door. The likes of, Chris Wood, he's dependable. He will do a job. They needed a striker. They've got Kieran Trippier, who is potentially going to be a future captain for them. Matt Targett, reliable. I suppose that the one that is maybe more of a a wild card was Bruno Guimaraes coming in. You know, that's more of an exciting signing, hopefully one that they can then build around beyond the end of this season. But for the players that have come in, they are more short-term jobs just to try and keep them out of the relegation zone. And my mind is already thinking, because I'm obviously invested in Watford and seeing what happens with Watford, I think that Newcastle will probably stay up. I think they've probably got enough, and I think that strengthening will probably help them. But I'm so fascinated to see what happens to those players, the likes of Dan Burn, Matt Targett, obviously on a loan, Chris Wood, maybe not Kieran Trippier because he's played at a high level, but they may well just become disposable in the summer when they go for their big plan, you know, the second season under Saudi Arabia. And then, you know, they will maybe explode and maybe bring in a player for £90 million alone rather than 5.
I'm just looking at all the transfer activity, and I can't see beyond Newcastle as being the winners in this transfer window. Of course, they've got more cash than anybody, so they were going to splash it, but they seem to buy players that they needed for the situation, players with character. I mean, if you bring Kylian Mbappe in, not saying there was anywhere close to happening, but can he get them out of relegation battle? I don't know. But someone like Dan Burn, who's got Premier League experience coming in, Kieran Trippier, who's a league winner, who played and has been tutored by someone like Diego Simeone and what he brings as a Champions League finalist as well, who's familiar with the English league, and Chris Wood. Do you think they were the winners overall? I mean, I have to say Aston Villa had a superb transfer window as well.
It's funny with Newcastle because I think if you actually look at the names they were linked with, there was almost like and as Adam said, they were linked with your Sven Botmans, your Diego Carlos's. Like, I feel as though that was almost a bit of a scattergun approach. And actually what's ended up happening where they've had to move down the list slightly to the different targets, that's probably worked slightly better for them. Chris Wood is, and I've always thought Chris Wood was like immensely underrated at Burnley. I actually think he could play for a sort of higher end Premier League side. He's actually a very, very good striker, I think. You know, he'll score goals, he'll potentially win them points. Kieran Trippier, as you say, big character, solid. Dan Burn, solid. Matt Targett, solid. These are the sort of players that they actually needed. People who'll just give you 6, 7, 8 out of 10 every week. No questions asked, no problems, no issues in the dressing room. Just hopefully for them, if you're a Newcastle fan, get them over the line, get them out of the situation they're in. And then maybe a little bit of magic from Bruno. That's the additional element that I think is interesting to see. I do think that they were winners in a sense, as you said. I think what's also interesting is the sort of domino effect of Newcastle's business. I think yesterday was one of the busiest January transfer deadline days I can remember. And I always felt that was in fact slightly sparked by the fact that suddenly there was this huge injection of money into the football world from Saudi Arabia. This cash that didn't exist 2 months ago in terms of football was suddenly freely available. It was buying players, and that allowed other clubs to make moves, that allowed other clubs to make moves, that allowed other clubs to make moves. I think, yeah, Newcastle were the winners, but actually, in a sense, they actually defined deadline day, because without them, I don't think it would have been the day that we saw.
Just a really quick one again from you, Amatai, because they continue to be linked to Dean Henderson, Jesse Lingard. They could only take one of those if they were on loan. Didn't happen. Even Dele Alli's name was linked very late on to go to Newcastle instead of Everton. Do you think they paid an appropriate amount of cash overall?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that, for example, the Chris Wood signing, a lot of people would forget this, but Chris Wood's obviously had a few years of Premier League experience now, but Newcastle only paid a couple of million more than Burnley paid to sign him from Leeds when he was a Championship striker. Kieran Trippier, they've got a fairly good deal on for him. You know, Matt Targett on loan, that's a very good deal. Dan Burn, they've not paid over the odds for. Again, Bruno's not been that expensive compared to how much, you know, they could have spent in the window. I think if you balance it up, they've essentially spent the difference between getting relegated to the Championship and staying in the Premier League. So actually, in a sense, if they stay up, this business has been absolutely fantastic value for money for them.
Okay. Before we sign off, though, this wasn't prepared, but as I was doing some research for the show today, I saw, Adam, that you contributed to an article on Fabio Cavallo of Fulham, of course, and that deal almost happened to Liverpool. How big of a miss is this for Liverpool? I mean, what kind of player is he? How exciting is he? Because I know you have knowledge now, of course.
Yeah, look, he's a hugely exciting player, and he made his Premier League debut last season prior to relegation, and he's kicked on this season, and he's been influential for Fulham. And they ideally would have liked to have extended his contract last summer, but that didn't come to fruition. The complications, and you can read more about it in the article that we wrote a couple of weeks ago, and there will be another one, I'm sure, in the fallout from deadline day, is that it's quite a complicated situation in terms of who manages him, and he's looked after by his family, which is there's nothing wrong in that at all, but it does make negotiations quite difficult. There were options for him abroad. There were other options in the UK. The fact that the Liverpool deal came so close wasn't surprising because they had been after him for quite some time. The fact that it fell down right at the last minute, it's now going to be really interesting to see what happens next in terms of that relationship between Fulham and Liverpool. What the player will now do, because he has multiple options now, can leave on a free at the end of the season. We're not quite sure exactly why it fell down, but there is a suggestion that there was maybe Liverpool weren't particularly happy in having a loan back and him playing at Fulham once again, which was what Fulham were hoping for. So yeah, it's fallen apart, and it fell apart right after the deadline. We were expecting this deal to go through, and then rumours started circulating, and then we nailed it down on The Athletic that it had broken down. And you can rest assured that we will be looking into it more and finding out exactly what happens and exactly what happens next. And that's the fascinating thing about transfer deadline day, that even if the deals didn't go through and you might feel disappointed, Arsenal fans, we've discussed things like that. It's the stories that emanate from deadline day and that trolley dash. And we almost signed him. This almost happened. And you'll be able to read about it on The Athletic, which is great for us, and great for us to sort of pull away these little stories that emanated after a crazy day.
Yeah, well, there's also an article about a deal that actually did go through for Liverpool, which is Luis Diaz, and how exciting he is, available on the Athletic app. And gentlemen, I want to thank both of you for joining me here today. Now, every talking point that we've had, there are articles on the Athletic, and there's going to be more continuously, so just like Adam said. So if you want to redeem a free 6-month subscription, head on over to theathletic.com/Astro6 to subscribe as an Astro subscriber. It is as easy as that. There'll be plenty more to talk about next week, though. Adam Carruthers signing off.